About a month ago, I covered this bed behind me in preparation for today, which is onion planting day. I amended it with the natively grown compost here, and then I covered it with pallet sheets so that it would basically encourage soil life to grow. So let me pull that off and I'll show you kind of what we've got underneath there and see if it worked. Some very happy soil. I'm going to be planting probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple of hundred onions today. I like having the ability to have the seed on hand and having the know-how to germinate my own. What I'm planting today is a yellow, a white, a red, and a bunching onion. I would say that there's typically somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 plants per 6-pack. And that's just on average since there's a differing amount in each cell. But what I'll do is I'll just take them from this point and cut them back 50%, cut the tops off. Yeah, by trimming this back 50%, it essentially encourages the growth to go into the roots rather than the tops at this point. Once you pull them out of the 6-pack, they're going to be significantly root bound. So you're going to need to break all that apart. And what I do typically is I don't really have to be too gentle with them at this stage. I'll just pull it all apart. Should only take a little bit of time to get them down to about this stage. Once you get kind of one to break loose, the rest of them just kind of start to easily come apart. And I don't tug on them too hard at this stage. I'll just work that root ball and then they'll come apart fairly easily. My spacing on these is I like to give 5 to 6 inches in between, and it allows for that onion to be able to grow and not be too crowded. Yeah, these are going to be some happy onions. There's a lot of worms down in here. Soil looks really good. What I like to do after I get everything put in is I'll come through and I'll actually mulch over the top of it with like a very fine wood chip. Because the more you can protect this soil, the more it's going to encourage worms and other microbial life to flourish. What you really don't want is this to dry out, to get to the point where it's getting battered by the sun, the wind, the rain. You want to be able to provide your soil life a nice environment to just flourish. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this after I get all these onions in, and that will put a nice cap over the top of this. As you can see, I can dig any bit of this up, and it's loaded with earthworms and all the things that I can't see in there that I know are amazing for the soil food web. I would say that I will probably get somewhere in the neighborhood of about 120 or so in this bed. We're expected to get more rain, so I'm just going to actually let all this get natively watered in with the rain. But it's going to be imperative that I get it covered up first, or this will probably get pretty well battered by the next series of storms that's coming in. I think there's about 5 rows of about 20. So there's probably about 100 that'll be in here. And the remainder of what I have, I'm going to go ahead and put in a Hugel mound that I have out in the front of my house. I'm walking out toward this Hugel mound that's in a corridor that leads off to another area of my property. But I pass through here every day. And I thought, well, why not grow some food in zone 1 where I pass every day? So this is something that I started last year. So it's been a full year, and there's all kinds of organic material up underneath this thing. But I actually was able to grow a little bit in this summer. And there are currently some potatoes that came up from my fall planting. However, they died back. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave those in there, and they're going to come back up in the spring. So as I dig down into this pile, expose some of this wood chip and leaves that I have over the top of it, you'll start to notice some soil life. Worms. And really good, rich, organic material that's starting to develop in here. Starting to get down to some of the more woody stuff, but that's going to break down over time, and then it's going to release the nutrient over time slowly into this pile. And I'm going to continue to add organic material over the top of this and encourage this to develop. Yeah, one of the true benefits of having multiple places to plant stuff is it does a couple of different things. One, it spreads out the risk that you have as it relates to pest pressure, whether that be insect pressure or animal pressure. It just spreads that out. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket. It's also nice to really have different areas on your property, because there's different microclimates on your property. Maybe an area is going to be more protected from the frost. Maybe it's going to have a different sun exposure. And the plants are going to respond differently to that. So I've experienced that here, planting certain things that are of the same seed, I planted them the same exact day, yet they do better in one location than another. So it's just nice to be able to experiment on your property. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do in developing these different planting spaces. The onions will be really nice too. These alliums, they're not really going to be susceptible to gophers and moles and different things like that, burrowing animals. They really don't go for those. Birds aren't going to eat them. I have a real problem with house sparrows around here where they want to like eat all the stuff that I want to try to grow. I'm not going to mess with onions or garlic or anything like that. This is a great location to plant something like this, because this is not at all protected from all the wildlife that lives around my property, in the form of rabbits, in the form of deer that come in at night while I'm sleeping in my bed to browse on all the stuff. So I need to basically plant things in those areas that they're not going to necessarily really want to come in and get after. It's also kind of nice that even if this doesn't perform or do well, one thing is that I'll learn from that experiment. And two, I'm not putting, again, all my eggs in one basket. This is not what I'm going to necessarily be relying on for my harvest for the year. As I became more interested in permaculture, I started to learn more about the relationship, the symbiotic relationship that plants have with one another, and the functional relationship that we can encourage by choosing the right plants to put together. I had the opportunity recently to go down to the Self-Reliance Festival, and I was enrolled into a swale workshop where we learned about that functional relationship between the different plants. And it was put on by Billy and Michelle Bond from Permapastures Farm. They did a great job with it, and I think all that attended learned a lot. Here's another example of good deals that you can come across. This garden soil retails for $9.99 at Home Depot. However, my son-in-law and I split a full pallet that was being offered up for $15. There was over 8 of these in that pallet. The pallet itself was stacked like 7 feet tall. And the reason they were letting it go for so cheap is just because these bags might have a little tear or hole or something like that in them. I can't even really see where this one's damaged. But again, we paid $15 for the entire pallet. And this here retails for $9.99. Yeah, we were pretty happy to come across this stuff.
If you're enjoying the content, please consider subscribing. See you next week.